Still busy with our year-end adjustments. So I'm just going to continue looking at different transactions, different scenarios, and how we are going to use that or show that within our financial statements. So insurance expense in your trial balance. So in your pre-adjustment trial balance is currently 4,800 Rand. This covers the 12 months ending 30 June 2026. So in other words, you have made payment up until the 30th of June 2026. So that means that the payment started for the period the 1st of July 2025 up until 30 June 2026. You made a full 12-month payment of 4,800 Rand for insurance. Now they are saying that your financial year ended on the 28th of Feb 2026. So it's like we did with the previous video, the one that we ended on. We've made payment for 12 months, but before the end of that 12-month period, we had our financial year end, so 28th of Feb 2026. So in other words, whatever I paid for after my current financial year end is considered a prepaid expense. It's a prepayment. So in other words, I cannot have that in my insurance expense account because it's not an expense for the current financial year. So I'm going to get my calculator here. So it's 4,800 is the total that I paid, divided by 12 to get the monthly amount. So this was 400 Rand per month. Per month. That is correct. Okay. Paranoia kicking in. Yes. Okay. So 400 per month. And we have now said that anything paid for that falls after my current financial year is to be considered a prepaid expense. So my financial year ended 28 Feb 2026. So March, April, May, June. 4 months that I've prepaid for. So I need to take that 400 Rand times 4 to get to 1,600. So of the 4,800 that I paid, 1,600 was prepaid. So I now need to remove this from my insurance expense. And they want me to show the journal entry. In other words, what am I going to debit? What am I going to credit? So this may not be included in my expense account. It has been prepaid. Therefore, I must remove it from the expense account by crediting the insurance expense. If you need to know why credit and not debit, why it's increasing on the debit side and decreasing on the credit side, please go to the grade 8 and 9 videos. We can no longer be wondering or be unsure about whether insurance increases or decreases on the credit side. Okay, so I need to remove it. Therefore, I will credit my insurance expense account because it's not included in the current year's insurance expense. This is now a prepaid expense current asset under trade and other receivables because they either need to give me back my 1,600 Rand that I've paid for, or they need to give me the insurance cover. Okay, so prepaid expenses, asset debit, remove it from insurance because it was not for the current financial year. In other words, in your SFP, you will show this under your trade and other receivables. Trade and other receivables as prepaid expense. And then in your SACI, when you're looking at the expense, the operating expense insurance, you will no longer have the 4,800 that you started with. You will have that less 1,600. So in other words, your insurance expense in your SACI will be 3,200 because you've removed whatever you have prepaid because it's not an expense for the current financial year. Okay, so there's the general journal entry together with SFP and the SACI. Then interest income of 3,000 Rand and interest receivable 500 Rand. This is also what you now saw on your pre-adjustment trial balance. So you have interest income, interest receivable, and interest received in advance. That's what you currently have in this account. They want you to show the adjustments in the SOCI and the SFP. So let's have SOCI on the one side, and then we'll have SFP on the other side. So interest income is our starting point because they are saying that according to your pre-adjustment trial balance, you have interest income and it is currently at 3,000 Rand. That's what you are showing now, right? So we have that piece of info. It then says that you have interest receivable 500 Rand. So in other words, you have 500 Rand's interest income that is not yet shown in your SOCI. So you must add the 500 Rand interest that should have been received in the current financial year. However, you haven't yet received it. It is still a receivable amount. And that means that you must also go to your current assets in your SFP. So current assets in the SFP under your trade and other receivables, trade and other receivables. You are not going to abbreviate like I'm going to now. You're going to write out receivables. And then there you will list that you have an accrued income. Why accrued? Because it is an income that you have not yet received. It's receivable. Okay, so that makes it an accrued income. So we are sorted with that one. Then it also says that included in this interest income of 3,000 Rand, you also have interest that you received in advance. So interest that you have now included in this 3,000 Rand that shouldn't be there. So remove it, debit the interest income account, and then reclassify that as a current liability in the SFP because it's an amount that you received in advance. So you either need to keep that money within the account or you need to give the interest back. So trade and other payables, trade and other payables. Once again, you are not going to abbreviate. Within your trade and other payables note, you will have income received in advance. So income received in advance. You are writing that out, no? Okay, so that is your SOCI versus what happens in your SFP for your interest received in advance, as well as your accrued income for your interest that you haven't yet received, but that you generated, income that you generated in the current financial year, or you earned that interest. Okay. Moving on to depreciation, I think what I shall do is, I think depreciation is going to be a video by itself.